and you're feeling all alone. Only you to hold your own. No one there to help you. Only there to hold you down. So stop. Don't beat up yourself. 'Cause it's everyone else. So don't look down. Look up around. 'Cause you are better. I can see that when the fire gets started, it takes a lot of tears to wash away. When they come and make you feel downhearted, don't hide away. And now it's feeling like the longest day. It's getting harder to find the will to stay. You gotta find the strength inside of you. Get started. It takes a lot of tears to wash away.
Well, hey there, friends. I hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Battles We All Face podcast, where we help you get from where you are to where you want to be and help really provide you hope in these uncertain times. And folks, on this show, you never know what can happen because Jojo, who normally does the show with me, unfortunately has had to tend to some personal matters and stuff that's going on there. All is good, all is fine, but she's not going to be here with us today. So rather than just do the show myself, I reached out to a very, very good friend of mine who is herself an author, who is herself a coach and has got many, many years of experience and just in so many wide ranges as well, and really brings all that experience to the table anytime we have conversations as well. She is the host of the We're Talking Shift podcast and a dear friend of mine. And I want to welcome the awesome Loree Bischoff. Loree, how are you doing today?
Hi. Well, I'm pretty good, all things considered. This was a little unexpected, but a welcome surprise. So I last minute, as you reached out to me, I scrambled and got myself together, and here I am, happy to jump in and be part of your show today. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and it's great to have you here. Loree, like I say, runs and operates the We're Talking Shift podcast, similar stuff to what we talk about here on the show, but with guests from around the world as well. So definitely go and check that out. It airs every Wednesday, I believe. Now, for us here, it's in the UK. It's at 6 p.m. that it'll launch. For you guys in the USA, on your very, very various times, it launched, I believe. Is it 2 p.m., Loree?
I think it's first thing in the morning. So anytime between 6 and 9 a.m. And we'll be resuming because I've had a little vacation for about 2 months, kind of stretched it out a little, but we will be resuming the show very soon and back on schedule.
That's so exciting. I can't wait. I can't wait to see and meet all the different guests that you've got lined up. Because this year so far has been actually really great content that's there. And again, just a wide variety of different guests that are there, folks. But today, of course, you want to know why we are here and what we're talking about. After last week's show that Joe and I covered, we got several requests and emails from various different people, various different places, all that was saying more or less the same thing, that in 2022, I think worldwide, the inflation prices are going AWOL, skyrocketing. They are just literally blitzing here, there, and everywhere. And it's the same, I believe, here in the UK is for folks in the USA, in Canada, Australia, around the world. And one of the questions that we keep getting asked is, how do we survive during these very, very challenging times? So I'm actually really glad, because Loree and I tend to see things as they're meant to happen. They're divinely purposed. And we love doing shows like this, especially when you talk about things of the spirit and other things. So we're going to offer a very different perspective to probably what you're going to hear a lot of other coaches offer today. So Loree, are you ready for this show? Are you excited?
I am. I'm ready to go. I still pounding down some coffee, getting all the circuits fired up. So let's do it.
Well, before we begin, I think a great place to begin is, Loree, what has been the most interesting thing that has either happened to you this week or that you've learned?
Okay. So interesting is, I think the learning part, what's interesting about this is I spent a week with my family, relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, in Minnesota, because I have an uncle who's like a father to me, who is currently in hospice care. And what I learned from being there and being immersed in that whole process and with my family is actually more of a reminder of how incredibly valuable and important it is to stay connected with your family. Um, and it really comes to the forefront when there's a situation that's somewhat dire, or an emergency, or somebody, when your people need you. It's really important to remember that staying connected and just being there, even if there's nothing that you feel like you can do, but just being there for people, without even having to say anything, is so valuable. And I think it's easy for us to all get so caught up in, what we think we have to be doing every day, and the commitments we've made, and what we have going on in our lives. And not to minimize that, but when something like this comes up, like it did for me, random one day, I got a text, and it said, here's where we're at. And I had a whole schedule for the entire week. I had clients, booked, and all kinds of stuff. So I canceled everything. And everybody understood. When you have to make adjustments like that for something that's important, most people will understand that families in family emergencies take priority.
Yeah.
And everyone is very understanding, and you know what, we'll get back to it when we get back to it. So I was able to go without having to worry and stress, and just be there, with my people, with my family, and immerse myself in this process. And it was so incredibly valuable. So I would say it wasn't so much about what I learned, but what I was very starkly reminded of.
That's really,
Yeah.
really cool. It's my old minister used to call it the power of presence. That
Mm-hmm.
whole idea that you didn't have to say anything. It was just the fact you were there. And there was so much power in just your physical presence being there for other people. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's very powerful stuff. And like you said, when you're going through these issues and the transitions pretty much in situations in life, it is a time where family, hopefully at least, does come together to spend those moments with your uncle, with, your parents and things like that. And oftentimes I actually feel that sometimes it can bring the worst out in people, but more often than not, it does bring the best out in people, which obviously it did in your trip there. I know you had some chaotic stuff trying to get back home, but, but
Yes.
thankfully you're back home.
Yeah. So that was another, I am an incredibly patient person. I am just, it takes a lot to get me to a point where I'm ready to lose it. And yesterday about pushed me to the brink. We all have our airport, flights from hell stories, and I had mine yesterday, trying to get out of Denver back into Cody, Wyoming. So on a plane, and pushed away and ready to take off, and nope, back to the gate, mechanical issues, and sit on the plane for a half an hour, and okay, it's not going to be worked out. Everybody off the plane.
Oh, wow.
Oh, but there's hope. We have a plane 2 gates down. We're going to put you on that one and send you. Yay, everybody's on that one. And we push away from the gate, and we sit for a half an hour, 40 minutes, and nope, technical issues on this one.
Wow.
Back to the gate, off the plane, and wait in the airport for another 2.5 hours for another plane to come in and pick us up. So it all worked out, but sitting captive, for so long, twice.
Yes.
But I kept reminding myself, I had to really, really work hard to remind myself, everything happens. It's good. Maybe all these delays are saving you from something else that I can't foresee. Trust in the timing. Just this is when you put into practice all of the work that you do and talk about, as your life's work. You talk about being able to, master your emotions and being calm and being kind, even when, there's stress and people are getting frustrated. Those are the times where now you need to put your money where your mouth is, and you need to practice what you preach and what you say you believe in. So that was a wonderful test. And I succeeded, but I'm not going to lie. It was definitely testing. However, when I was waiting for that last and final flight for 2.5 more hours, as usually does, and I was sitting for having a bite to eat and a glass of wine to relax, and I met a wonderful person that we sat and chatted for an hour and a half, and now we're going to visit when we're in Florida, because they live near my son, and so I made a new friend. So there we go. Who knows?
That is super cool.
Yeah. So if you just, if you just really, again, practice what you preach, and trust in the process, and not let yourself get, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and here was the wonderful bonus, though, John.
There's more.
There's more. This is a good one, though. In between one of those chaotic on-off moments, I think it was after the second flight, I was on the phone with my husband, letting him know about the delays, and he said, "Oh, by the way, they dropped the mask mandate here in the yesterday in the middle of the afternoon." So I looked around, because I didn't know I was on a plane, and then I looked around and I could see that almost no one in the airport had their mask on, and so that was just a nice little bright spot, I gotta say, to not have to put that thing back on. On top of everything else. So there was so we celebrated with our wine at the restaurant, and toasted. I know everyone is not excited about that, but I am, and I know that a lot of people are. So, there was that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, we were having this conversation with family over the weekend. Obviously, it was Easter celebrations for those of you. Obviously, I haven't seen you, but happy Easter to you, and happy Easter to Loree and Eric and everybody. And it is really interesting. But the conversation that came up is really surrounding the whole idea of taking the masks off, and people still being terrified. And I can understand it, because Loree and I, both of us, really teach, and we talk about a lot. You've been conditioned, essentially, and the world has been conditioned pretty much for 2 years straight. You got to wear the masks, you got to have the vaccine, you got to do this, you got to do all the social media or the social distancing things. Maybe there should be social media distancing, I don't know. But the reality is that when people have been conditioned that way constantly for 2 years, 18 months, whatever it's been now, it is going to take some time to readjust, for sure. But like you said, Loree, I know a lot of people that are happy about it and excited about it. I've now gotten to the stage, because of the way that my life is shaped, that I almost forget. My wife and I went on a hike about 2 weeks ago for my birthday, and we went in to use the facilities afterwards. And only when we came out did I realize neither of us have worn our masks, because it's like we live in a whole other world, basically, here.
Right.
But I know a lot of people. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, it's true. It's amazing how quickly, I think, first of all, it's amazing how quickly I feel everyone adapted to having to do that, for, good, bad, right, or wrong. It did. And very interesting and amazing at how quickly word spread like wildfire. I mean, people were getting notes, and like I said, I got off the airport and I looked around, I'm like, this just happened, and there were no masks around. And so it really was indicative of how most people were simply tolerating this only because they had to, and were, that sense of liberation and relief that came over most people when that was done. I didn't see anyone, maybe one person that kept their mask on
Right.
yesterday. So there are still people that think it's a good idea, and they fortunately they have the freedom to still wear their masks.
Absolutely.
So good for them. They can still wear it all over if they want, but the rest of us don't have
Mhm.
to acquiesce to that any longer, that feel that it's not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, probably in many ways the most interesting thing that I've, discovered in myself, probably in this week and in the previous weeks, has all been about not worrying too much about what other people are saying and what other people are thinking about what you do. Because I think the way that I'm seeing life more and more now is, at your maximum, you've got 120 years. Most of us are probably not going to live that long. And when you kind of look at it from a different perspective, a more divine spiritual perspective, you're here for a purpose, and you often know what that purpose is, but it gets clouded by gotta go to work, gotta make money, gotta do this, gotta do that. And I think what I'm discovering more and more now is I'm no longer worried about, well, what about if someone doesn't like that book, or someone doesn't like that painting, or someone doesn't like that show? And I'm like, 120 years physically, I won't be here anymore, but I will have left behind a legacy and something special that's still going to touch people's lives. I'm not going to care whether people liked it or not. So that's, I think, for me, what I've been learning more and more, as I'm going through it and relearning, and it's okay, because other people are going to have, all their opinions and everything, you know,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
okay. You've 8.6 billion people on the planet. They're all going to have an opinion. I don't need to listen to any of them. I can hear them, but I don't need to listen to them. Two very different things.
Yeah.
But obviously, as we move into now, spring, certainly here in Scotland, it's a glorious sunny day. I know we were talking about that before we came on air. Now all of a sudden we've got seemingly a new problem. And folks that have watched the show, and obviously Loree and I, you know this, that life is really a series of problems and our ability to navigate them. That's, from the time we are born to the time that we physically leave this planet. And inflation is now one of the biggest problems that seems to be all over the world. Obviously, stuff that's going on with Ukraine and with Russia and Putin and all of the stuff that's there.
Mm.
And it's one of the questions that, I don't know about you, Loree, but I'm certainly hearing and seeing an awful lot all over social media. I know it's been on mine several times and through a series of emails as well. And people are saying, how can you do, a show and a talk all about how to navigate this? So I think it would be really good, obviously, from the different perspectives. That's why I'm glad you're USA based. I'm here in the UK.
Mhm.
I think we're pretty much seeing the same things. I know Lillian Garcia a couple of weeks ago, a mutual friend of ours, she was filling up her, I don't know if it was her SUV, she was filling up her car, and it cost something like $45 to get it like halfway.
Mhm.
How are things over there?
Yeah, the same.
Yeah.
It's we haven't seen this kind of inflation, gosh, 30, 40 years,
Wow.
I think, something like that. It's been a long time. So it's pretty steep, and it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight, although we know there will
Yeah.
be. But I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets
Mhm.
better. So just, I think, mentally preparing for that is probably smart. I think a lot of people are really struggling
Mhm.
right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, gas is ridiculous. So when when it costs you more to get to work
Yes.
than it does, to get
Yeah.
to be there and pick up your paycheck at the end of the week, it's people start to wonder, what can I do? I'm between a rock and a hard place.
Mhm.
And that is very depressing and stressful and confusing. And I think a lot of people are really at their wits' end between, between what's been going on with this pandemic chaos for the last, 2 years now, and now that I think people are very exhausted and just really, really hoping and looking for a change. And unfortunately, the things that we can't control, we can't control, we can't change those things, and it's very easy to get so wrapped up in that, because it's a conflict that you can't manage. So the only thing that we can do then, right, is do our very best to keep turning our energy and our focus away from the things we can't control, back over to, okay, what is going on in my life that I can control? And there's a lot, there's things that we can do that hopefully will just lessen the stress, even if it just lessens the stress a little bit and the fear while we get through this next phase. And I think one of the things that I've talked about before that I think is really important, because it really comes down to attitude and mindset, is not actually viewing this as the next problem.
Correct.
When we look at everything as a problem elicits stress, it elicits fear, it elicits, I have to find a solution, I have to find a solution, I have to find a solution. So there's desperation, which again leads back to fear, because what if I don't? A problem does not usually inspire you to want to get up in the morning and tackle the day, right? So I think the first thing that I suggest that you do, whether it's this or something else, is reframe that from a project to or from a problem to a project. So now, instead of this is the problem I have to figure out, this is the project that I'm working on. Because a project elicits an entirely different attitude and mindset, and hence feelings and emotions, right? A project is something that you feel like you are molding, you are creating, you're figuring it out. It's a challenge that you are working on because you want to, because you choose to. You are, if I have a project, I'm excited to get up in the morning and tackle my project. So I think if a person is able to remind themselves to reframe that into a project, it just brings a different set of emotions to the forefront. And so you will, maybe you're experiencing the same things, but you're experiencing them with a different attitude, a different mindset. Therefore, you're going to generate different emotions, and hopefully then less of the negative emotions and more of the, I can do this, here's what I can do, here's how I can shape this, here's how I can rethink this. So I think that's a really good starting point, because everything, as we talk about, so many times, John, is everything starts in the mind.
Correct. Yes.
So when you're up against something like what we're up against now, the place to start managing is in the mind. And then once you get that shifted, then you can start working on the things like, okay, maybe I need to review my budget. And I review my budget and I really look at what I can live without right now, or where can I reallocate funds? Instead of going and getting, Starbucks every day and getting my manicures and pedicures and getting things that are not necessities, you could reallocate those funds to, maybe stashing away a little more in your savings account. So you've got a little bit of a, something there to lean into should you need it. Taking on no more debt is really important. So if you can, train yourself to make sure that you're not adding debt to what you may already have, or taking on new debt and kind of digging yourself into a deeper hole, which is going to make you even more fearful. So, those are a couple of things that I think people can start doing to survive this next phase. Refocusing, kind of back to what I was talking about earlier, refocusing on things that are really, really the most important, which is always the relationships in your life. So taking your focus, do what you can do. If you're going to work, you go to work. If you have to put gas in the tank, you put gas in the tank. But don't get upset about it then, because it doesn't change how much it's going to cost you. If you're going to do it anyway, then stop. Don't bitch about it. Don't complain. Just do it. And then keep your, feelings and emotions focused on the things that are, at the end of the day, are really the most important, which is your relationships. And I think that keeping that in mind is is really, really important. I also think, especially because we live in a small community, that if you do have to go out and, spend money or go out and do something, that you really try to remember to support your local
Mhm,
businesses,
mhm.
because they're in the same boat that you are. And you want them to survive. They're trying to survive too. So if you do have the resources that you need to go out and do something, or you're able to go out for dinner, or buy groceries, whatever, I think the most important, one of those important things you can do to support your community is to support your local
Yeah,
businesses, and not big chains that are nationwide. Don't worry about them. Worry about your local, you know community.
yeah, yeah,
So those are just
absolutely.
a few things off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean that was fantastic. It really was. And I think it is so important because, like you say, we are all in the same boat. But there are a few things to remember from that as well. Is this isn't new. This is the first thing that I tell every single person anytime we talk about this. This is not new. Again, if you study your history, you know this has happened. The stock market crashed in the 1929, I believe. We talked
Mhm.
about that in last week's show. It crashed. We had crashes in 1800s, 1700s. There was fights, there was wars here, there, and everywhere in the United States. Obviously, you had civil war, you had friction here, there, and everywhere. If you know your history, you know this has happened before. That's the first thing. The second thing is it always is shuddery and it always goes all over the place. There's always a lunatic somewhere in the world that is causing mayhem and havoc and everything like that. That has always been there. I've had several of them since I've been alive, and Laura, you may have had a few more since you've been alive, but the reality is they've always been there causing havoc. What you need to know is it does level out. It's like the stock market. It levels out. It seems a little bit shaky, but on the whole, it does level out. It is important, like Loree was saying, not to panic, not to get into that mindset. And again, we've talked about this before. Our business is changing. Now, this past weekend, actually, Loree, one of my big celebrations this weekend, our Art from the Heart Facebook page reached over 115,000 people all over social media. It was phenomenal. If they all buy a painting, I may be in trouble because I don't think I've got that amount of life left, and especially with all the,
Right.
but it was amazing. But what I'm finding as well is that my businesses can be a little, the ones that are going to make the bigger income for sure. But my wife's piano business is the one that's the more stable. So an issue when my business is going through all these changes, and like Loree was saying, you can't control what happens externally, but you can control what happens internally, how you respond to it and what you do. So I'm looking around and I'm saying, well, my main focus right now is my book that's coming out in November. My main focus is, what I'm doing both with Loree, with Joe, with other people around. I need to figure this out actually. So as we've got income streams coming in, what do we do? So I said to my wife, I said, how many more students can you take? So she gives me the number. So I set about marketing her business left, right, and center. I think within a weekend, her lessons were full up. It was brilliant. And this leads me to one of my most important points to really keep your mindset. And I don't care what, this about me, folks. I don't sit under any religious labels anymore. I don't care if you're Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Jedi, whatever you want to be. God is the source of your supply, and in God there is no lack. Okay, now if you call it God, if you call him universe, if you call him source, I call him divine spirit, if you call him, Mike Rogers, whatever you feel comfortable, I don't mind either way. For me, like I say, it is important to keep that mindset going because you're not doing this yourself. And I think oftentimes when we're born, we come into the world, we do all right for the first 9 months growing in our mother's stomach, we're born, and then literally on day 2, it's like life is a struggle, life is difficult, and we're great. This is ingratiated into us, that life is difficult, life is a struggle. And when you start to think about it, it's like Laura was saying, it's a series of tasks, it's a series of adventures, it's a series of whatever projects, don't get so bogged down by the external situations. Remember, it has always been out there. There's always been a lunatic. Remember this, but you have survived to this point. You've not only survived, but you've thrived, And when you start looking around and saying, actually, I might not be able to control everything out there, but I can do some stuff in myself. So here's a little list for you folks, just to rattle off, to give you some ideas. Remember, first of all, do not get stressed, okay? Easier said than done, I know, but remind yourself, God is the source of my supply. In God, there is no lack. Everything that God does comes around to fruition. Okay, that's what you need to really ground yourself down in. I do that all the time, especially when my businesses are changing. Why? Because it stops me from worrying and being like, well, we haven't got money here, we haven't got money there, you know. But my wife has got that steady stream of income. We may not be losing money, or we may not be making as much money, but we're not losing any money. So we're actually doing well here. And I know when it comes to November, that book with our publishers and everything, yep, have fun with that one. You know, so that's the first thing to remember. Second thing is keep focused on what you're doing. All of these external storms and things that are going on can very easily shudder you and knock you around on your course. And that's what they're designed to do. But if you're keeping focused as to what it is that you're doing, like Loree said, if it's going to work. A story that Alan Watts tells, and Loree, you've probably heard this one as well, you know, because I think it's been told by a number of people. People go to the mall, or over here we call it the supermarket. They load up their basket or cart full of goodies, and then they go to pay at the checkout or at the till. See, we're doing bilingual here, folks. And what you tend to find is they never sit there and say, oh, look at me, I've got a basket full of goodies. They feel upset because they have just parted with some very, very well fabricated paper. That's what they get upset, as opposed to, oh, look at what we've got, look at what we've actually, they think about what they've lost. We've lost the 30 pounds, but we've gained a shopping cart full of goodies. And it's remembering what you have, because that can make it, see the difference there between the energy when I talked about losing, but when I said, oh, we've got a shopping cart full of goodies, you know, it's a different energy. You want to keep in that high energy as much as you can.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say, Loree, and I want your opinion on this, I suppose, from an American point of view as well. The one thing that I'm probably really focusing on as an organization, as our businesses this year, more than anything right now, is building assets. And the reason I say that is because so many people go to work for a paycheck and for a weekly or monthly salary. Now, that's good. It's steady. Is it going to get you to a point of financial freedom? For me, I can honestly say probably not. What you tend to find as well is you're going to trade 80,000 hours of your life. That's statistically what they say you trade if you work from 16 to 45, 16 to 65, in fact, and it's 80,000 hours of your life that you are going to trade. I sat and I thought about that, and I thought, again, I want to build my businesses. And when you're looking at all the financial stuff and all the, again, money historically has lost its value. It goes down in value. So you want to make sure that whatever you are saving, you of course want cash. You need access to cash, but you also want to make sure that wherever you're putting money, banks are not a good place. We've covered that in a previous episode, but it is going into building assets. And, again, there are people out there a lot more, able-bodied and everything to talk about this than I am, but I know, the S&P 500s are very good, and, index funds and things like that, they are the most safe things. And it means that your finances are going to be growing. But I tend now to work more for building assets than I do for a paycheck, because again, I know the money depletes if it's in the bank. And we see that all the time, but also it means that it's constantly making money. And my latest thing, which Loree and I'm sure we'll talk about after the show, is I sat on the sofa the other day, really kind of just tired and just not, my mind was just a plethora of all sorts of different stuff that was going on. And I said, I'm tired of having to work for money. And this seems like a really strange thing to say to people, because, they look and said, well, we go to work, we get paid. I was like, what if we could condition and create our lives that we got paid whether we went to work or not? And that's something that we're building up now through courses. We're going to be putting them on Skillshare, and it's a shorter version of Academy. I'm trying to think what it is. Ademy, I think it is, but also on our various, that's the one. Yes, thank you. But also on our websites and things. And we're building up those, streams of income without having to be constantly there all over the time. Because it means the more time I can spend on my paintings, making better artwork, but also the books, the more we can help, the more courses we can build. And it's a simpler, less frantic way of working more than anything else. So I would definitely encourage you, hey, don't leave your job until you've got income streams, but hey, build up these income streams and learn how to do this while you are working. There's no reason why you can't stop working. I have a friend of mine that's in Oxford. He's a doctor. He gets paid very, very well, but he also has a phenomenal YouTube channel, and he's also got courses here and there and everywhere. So, you can do these things, but it takes the stress off. Have as many income streams as you possibly can. Loree, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really great advice. And it was one of the things on my list too. I had it worded as invest in yourself.
Yes.
But yeah, so if you have the time and can, allocate a little bit of resources if you need to learn something or to develop some skills to invest in yourself, that would lend itself to creating some other revenue streams. That's if you have the opportunity to do that and can figure out a way. I think that is brilliant advice. Always good. You can't go wrong by investing in yourself.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even if you are not in a position just yet to to create something, to invest in yourself, to create some other forms of revenue, you can invest in yourself in other ways. Like maybe you want to invest in up leveling your health, which is the most important thing you can invest in, because without your health, what do you really have? Right. So you could still say, well, maybe I'm not quite in this position to do some of these things yet, but I can eat a little bit better. I can move and exercise. I can still invest in myself. There is, if you have access to your internet through your phone or your computer, you can invest in, increasing your knowledge and your wisdom.
Yeah.
You can invest in developing a closer relationship with your source, which brings me to your other point about, with the source of your supply, which I think is so fundamentally crucial to not get caught up in that fear-based, scarcity-based mindset of, oh, there's only so much of what I need to go around, and the pie's only this big, and I can't get any of it, because they think that the source is all out there.
Yeah.
And so, if you believe in God or your higher power, the universe, if you just believe in, energy, all of it is all out there and available. Your source of prosperity, your source of abundance is not your employer, as much as it feels like that. And it's very hard for people to wrap their head around. But if you're able to consider that somehow, our creator, the source of everything, has managed so far to supply everything that we need.
Yeah.
And, for thousands and thousands of years now, people have been surviving with a lot less than what you have now. So there is a way. And if you place your faith in that source, as opposed to, whoever signs your paycheck, that will, I think, help you relax a little bit and feel like everything's going to be okay. Just, keep that relationship strong. And I think understanding that, abundance is available, and it's not the same for everyone. And not getting caught up in, it's like your shopping cart analogy, you not getting caught up in what you think you've lost, what you think is not available, or what you think you can't have, and really focusing on, yes, but am I able to have a roof over my head? Am I able to eat? Am I able to feed my family? And sometimes you need to just pare things down and really focus on, okay, we're okay, then we're going to be fine. And just one day at a time. I know it's easier, like you said, easier said than done, but it is possible. And billions of people have been doing it for thousands of years. I like that saying, I don't remember where it is in the Bible, but it's, it comes to pass. And I think understanding that it comes to pass isn't just feeling like, okay, pretty soon this is going to be gone. Pretty soon this is going to be past, and pretty soon we'll be somewhere else. I think looking at that from, it comes in order to pass. It's here for a reason, whatever the it is. It's here for a reason. It's coming so that you then can pass through it so that it can pass, but not because, not like, it's a it's a storm of locusts. And it's going to pass, but there's a reason that the locusts come, right? So I think having faith that for whatever reason this is here because it's meant to be here, because we're meant to pass through it, it's meant to pass through us, and just not resisting that, just putting yourself in that place of instead of it's like, swimming against the current. If you just go with the current, it's just so much easier and you suffer so much less, and it will pass.
Yeah.
So I really like that you brought that up about the source of our supply. Focusing on instead of what you can't have, what you think you're going to lose, what you think everybody else has that you don't have. That's a terrible thing to focus on, and it will only keep you in a very stressed and fearful state of mind, which does not help your situation.
But it also, actually attracts to us. I know in the course that we did for Teen Life Coaching that we talked about this, and we've talked about it individually and collectively. You end up attracting into your life that which you focus on. Again,
Right.
It's like Wayne Dyer has said a number of times, before he passed, that what was it? Thought was the ancestor to all action. There is nothing that hasn't been thought of. The houses that we live in, the cars that we're driving, they all came from a thought. And a person literally got up one day, saw a boulder and thought, I could turn that into a wheel. And then someone else took it a little step further and thought, I could add a chassis to this. And then some genius, I believe in the 1920s, maybe even earlier than that, actually, decided, I know, let's put an engine in this. And I believe his name was Henry Ford. And,
Right.
it's when you start to see again, okay, this has gone on, this has happened, but again, it's where you place your focus. That is what is going to happen. That's why at the moment I sit there and I'm just like, okay, great. We had I literally watched the audience double over the weekend from 50,000 to 100,000. I'm like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Now, did any of them come in and order straight away? No. So anyone could say, well, John, you got a lot of people there, but it wasn't a success. I'm like, but it's the first time that they're seeing me. And on this page, and for the first time, 150,000 people, that's a big deal to me. And I'm seeing that as a success because I know that's going to come in, that's going to happen. And what's the alternative? I sit there and I say, this didn't happen. It was terrible. It was a waste of time. Again, see the difference in the energy, folks. This is what we're talking about. So,
yeah. And to your point, I mean, how do you define success? So that person's, one person's definition of success can be totally different than another person's definition of success. Yeah. So there's not just one.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember as well that, while all this stuff may be going on around you, if you can control, and this is where we talk about inner engineering and self-mastery and self-maintenance and things, if you can control how you respond to it, as opposed to, my boss only signed my paycheck, but there was a little bit less in it this week, and you get frustrated and wound up. You need to learn how to master that a little bit better and say, okay, well, he gave me this. I can talk to him calmly and say, Phil, Bill, whatever his name is, do you realize you only paid me this? Again, how you respond to these situations is going to be indicative as to how the result plays out. And, what is the point in stressing out and worrying about it? Because like Loree said, Loree deals a lot of stuff in health. I have talked about it a number of times on my own self. When you get worried and stressed out, that's when ulcers start happening in your inner stomach lining. That's when the weakest part of your body is going to start aching because you are putting all that acid and that negative energy in there. This is where a lot of diseases come from, because in the most sophisticated, I suppose, computer known to man, i.e. us, very few people have actually learned how to use it, and that worry and stress doesn't help the situation because it prevents you from finding the answer and seeing the solution.
Right. Yeah. Our biocomputers, we're literally chemistry making machines, and stress creates cortisol. And we are not designed to be able to take that input of that hormone cortisol coursing through our blood all day, every day. In fact, I just read something the other day while I was on the plane, one of them, reading that I think the stat was like 90% of all doctor visits end up being stress related,
I can
because
believe
it's
that.
one of the number one things that are causing health issues with people. And they don't understand a lot of times that every emotion that we have is literally creates a chemical reaction in our body. So if your emotions are always fear-based,
Yeah.
stress-based, anger-based, distress, I mean anything that's really negative, and it's a habitual state that you are in, your body is making chemicals that correspond with those emotions, and that is going to have detrimental effects on your health. It's not maybe, it is. It's just a matter of time and how in your particular body is it going to manifest. Might be a heart attack, might be a stroke, might be heart disease, might be ulcers, it could be might be depression, it might be any number of things, but it's going to happen if you have a habit of being in that kind of emotional state. Whereas if we are able to learn how to manage how we respond to things, as you say, which you can do. A lot of people are under the misguided notion that they feel and then they think, but it's the opposite. It's you think and you ascribe a meaning to whatever it is out there, and then you feel. And so you can learn to reverse that and manage that. And when you learn how to become a master of your emotions, you then are becoming the master of the chemical lab that's going on inside of your body. And you will, by producing healthy chemicals, the dopamine and the serotonin and the things that make you feel good, the good happy hormones, you will be in a much better than state of mind to manage whatever it is that you need to manage in your life. So it's really important that people understand that whatever you're thinking and whatever meaning you are ascribing to what you're thinking about, there is an immediate response in your body. And you get to control what it's going to be. Are you going to create, the chemicals that are going to harm you? Or are you going to create the chemicals that are going to make you feel okay, from okay to great?
Yeah, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, I know we've talked about this a number of times, it takes 0.009 of a millisecond to go from thinking it to perceiving it to acting upon it. It happens really, really quick, quicker than you can blink. And you might say, well, how do you guys know this? I say, well, because as you guys know, I study social science, I study psychology and neurobiology and things, and I enjoy studying these. And when you realize that your brain, it's not just this thing where you just turn up and it's like, oh, I look amazing. You're a series of atoms and cosmetics basically put together. That's it. So when you compare yourself and you say, well, I look better than that other person, what you're actually saying is my genetic structure and my atoms have been formed better than that other person. We've talked about that before. Again, language, folks, think about that. Conversation for another time. But the really important thing to remember is that your brain is a muscle. It is, one of the most ugly, to be fair, parts of your body that there is. Scientists will tell you that it is kind of gross, but it's an organ, it's a muscle, it is basically the neuro center of all that goes on. And the reason I call it a muscle is because it can be shaped and it can be conditioned like a bicep or like a pectoral muscle or like a gluteus maximus, basically by what you put into it. So when you're sitting there watching horror films on a Saturday night and you're then struggling to sleep, you're stressed, you wound up, you wanted to drink to excess, do you spot a possible link that's going on? When you are sitting there and you're in church, for example, and you feel, yes, this is really good. The pastor gave a great message today. We're singing all these happy songs, and you leave church feeling amazing. Again, do you spot a correlation? I challenge you this week to spot correlations when you feel happy, when you feel sad. Begin noticing, these different things that are going on. If, like Loree was saying right at the beginning of the show, you are looking at investing in yourself, but you don't have necessarily, or let me scratch that, your awareness of money isn't there yet. It hasn't physically appeared. Then there are a ton of free stuff out there. I mean, audiobooks now are all over YouTube. They're all over websites, all over the place. It is the direction to save the trees that I think a lot of the things are going now. You can educate yourself in a phenomenal way. Last year I've talked about it so many times. I get excited about it because from like February right the way through to December, I listened to 763 books. The knowledge that I got from that was unbelievable. That's how, we talk about so many things that are there. And when you start to do these things on a regular basis, like daily, you find, first of all, it doesn't become a chore. It actually is exciting because you're doing stuff that you love. Secondly, if you put your headphones on at just the right volume, it actually interrupts your pattern, your thought wave pattern. It's a thought wave pattern interrupt. And it stops you from worrying, from getting anxiety, from panicking, because your brain physically can't focus on those things. Well, the audiobooks are going into your ears and speaking to you constantly. It's almost impossible to think about worry at the same time you've got someone either feeding you information and telling you the opposite. That is why, like we always say, conditioning your mind is like conditioning your body. It is so important because if you don't do it, as Buddhist teaching says, there is nothing more dangerous than an unguarded thought, and it's your thoughts that can get you into a world of trouble. Any final thoughts, Loree?
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really great. The pattern interrupt and listening to something else, because a lot of times what we don't realize is that we actually have two minds. We have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. And 90%.
I love seeing you get so excited about this. The smile that just beamed.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a good realization to have if you're not aware, because the important thing about this is 90 or 95% of the time, your subconscious mind is what's running the show. And your conscious mind is only managing about 5% of the time. So if you find that you are having a hard time, breaking some habits or thinking differently about things or responding differently, you want to, but you just can't seem to get it. Understand that a lot of that is the subconscious programming that was basically programmed into your mind before you were 7 years old. All of those things happen in childhood, and then we don't realize as we become adults, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep reacting this way? Why does this keep happening? Well, a lot of it is not, even when I don't want this, I want to change, but you just can't seem to. So you have to get down into the subconscious and reprogram it. And one of the ways that you can do that, like you suggested, is to listen to something else, but you must do it continually. You must listen to whatever it is you choose to help you with that, like every day for at least once a day. And it doesn't have to be long, 15 minutes for at least 21 days. And then you will start to reprogram some of those, negative beliefs or negative patterns or responses, that have been part of you since you were a child. So it can be done, but you do have to cut yourself a little bit of slack if you've been struggling, and understand that there are things going on beneath the surface that you may not be aware of. But now, once you're aware, you can do something about it, but it will take a little bit of effort and consistent reprogramming. And it's very successful, and you can completely change your entire life if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously how you and I ended up working together. I've talked about the story a number of times, and it is literally incredible. There are literally no limits as to what you can do. And the great thing about it is you can study that which you desire to become. We talked about this a few weeks ago, because people will always say, oh, well, what do I study? What do you want to do? Do you want to be a best-selling author? There are books out there. There's a ton of stuff out there. Do you want to be an artist? Whatever it is. If you want to learn the stock market, if you want to learn finances, it's all out there on YouTube. You can literally type in, Robert Kiyosaki audiobooks. It is there. But the importance, as Loree said, and I really, really want to make this clear, folks, about the consistency, is because like a muscle, like the top part of your arm, your bicep, if you do not train it at least once or twice a week, you're basically going to revert back to what it was before, which is just skin, and just, it's just going to be there. Your brain is so powerful. You've no idea, how powerful your brain is until you put it into action, and it's sitting there waiting for you to put it into action, say, teach me something, let's do this. It's like the little robot inside your head that's controlling your body. And it is phenomenal. And when you start to understand this, people will be like, wow, what the heck did you do to yourself? And they'll want to do it to them. But one of the final things that I really want to, I think, really just emphasize more than anything, this needs to begin. I honestly prescribe from childhood, from the time that they are little babies, because as Joe and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, Loree, we were talking regarding bullying in schools. And I think there'd been another series of severe bullyings and things that I think had gone on over in the USA and in London, which is the opposite end of the country to me. And, the topic came up and we were talking about it. And I said, the part of the reason for this is because children in particular, they grow into adults. And like you rightly said, they just sort of drift along. They get a job, they get married or relationships, and then that's them. And they wonder why they're miserable, and they wonder why they do the foolish acts that they do. And it's because they've never been taught how to inner engineer, how to self-master. And it has to begin in the schools, and it has to begin, from the time you are babies, because if it doesn't, then that's why you've got a lot of this bullying stuff going on, because people don't know how to manage themselves. So I think honestly that yoga and as I call it, mental medication, call it mind management, we will get a better name for it at some point. I think it has to take place, and it has to take place in the schools en masse, rather than some of the teachings that are going on right now.
Yeah, I think they've seems like they're getting a little off course, to put it mildly, and taking some liberties that
Yes.
they have not been granted by parents of
Yeah.
children. So that is of great concern. And I think you're right about some things that need to be maybe reprioritized in the schools. But parents, I mean, it starts at home, of course, and there are plenty of parents that are doing a great job teaching their children values and morality and kindness and maturity at home, so that when they get into a school environment where they're surrounded by a lot of kids that haven't been taught those things, they're able to still manage themselves and come through it okay without succumbing to some of the tragedies and bullying and stuff. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard, but it does have to start at home. And then it would be wonderful if certainly at some point the education system got up to speed with what is really needing to be taught as far as managing your emotions and basic fundamental values and how you treat people. That really needs to be right up there with reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they say. Some of these other things that have been a focus, I strongly believe that schools have no business even discussing, even bringing it up. No business at all. So that's something that I would really like to see start to change.
And I completely agree with you, and I find it really interesting because, and this sort of slid in nicely to the conversation, because just before obviously Loree and I came on the show, my wife was telling me about a transgender psychologist and how concerned that she was with regards to the amount of, kids and I suppose now teenagers that are going for transgender operations, as young as 13, but they're starting to talk about it from 5 and 6 years old. And I honestly believe, and I'll go on record, folks, because at the end of the day with social science, this is the stuff that we explore and examine. This is stuff for you to think about. We'd love to hear your views on it, of course. But I honestly believe sometimes that teachers, and in terms of the higher ups, a lot of the teachers, they're just following orders, but in terms of the higher ups, it's almost like they and scientists are playing a very cruel game here, because this is what happened in the 1800s when they started operating on brains before they had any form of, pain relief or anything like that. It was a case of, well, anyone that's on the street, they can come in, we'll give them a free meal. And basically they were, part of the surplus population. Who cared if they, had their eyeballs popped out and the brains and everything? This is what happened. And I honestly believe this is what's happening again, because again, history repeats itself. This is no surprise. So
experimenting on our children is
Yeah.
appalling.
Yes.
Um, it's appalling, and I question the judgment of
Yeah.
parents that are willing to go along with allowing
Absolutely.
that. I'm kind of think how it's not that hard to think back to when you were a
Hmm.
teenager, because you're right, this usually starts going on in the early teen years, 12, 13,
For
14.
me, when I was a teenager, Loree, I mean, that I knew of one person that was a homosexual in the school, and he was very open about it. I don't think we ever had conversations, oh, so and so's a lesbian, or so and so's this, or so and so's that. I said it a couple of weeks ago that I think the schools are massively focusing on the wrong thing. Yes, it used to be that, you know, people would go to school to get an education, to basically go to be a worker. That's what you're trained to do. As what the person who you're very fond of, know, Gary Vee, he was talking about that several weeks ago. You know, people go to school to be trained to be a worker, and that's what they do. They're not trained to be an entrepreneur. That's by the by. But, you know, when you start getting away from that, and now it's a case of, well, you need to know about Black history, you need to know about lesbian history, you need to know about, you know, gay history. It's like, it's history. I mean, you talk to Morgan Freeman and he gets really cross when, you know, you ever hear, you know, someone call it Black history. It's like, why does it have to be Black history? It's history.
Yeah.
And I can understand, and I see this a lot with people now, that you would almost stereotypically expect to, oh, well, this is great, this is wonderful, and they're like, no, this is not great, this is not wonderful. And I think, like I say, I mean, you know, we don't have kids at this point, but for us, it's been a conversation we've had a lot. That's like, would we homeschool? Because we can control them, what they learn, and I can make sure that they learn how to manage money, how to, you know, be entrepreneurs, how to do whatever they need to do. But I think when you start getting away from, you know, what you're actually there for, and it starts to be more of a seemingly a political game, and you know, a very, very dangerous game. I think it is so, so dangerous. And again, if people dealt with their inner engineering, with their self-mastery, mental health issues, 95% of them would be gone. A lot of these issues of, you know, well, what is my sexual identity? Again, they're looking in the wrong place. You know, go back and watch the show from a couple of weeks ago, folks, because Joe and I, we talk about this in depth. But again, they forget that they are a divine being having a temporary human experience, that their identity is not to be found in, you know, sexual identity or mental illness, and then it defines them. So I find it
Right.
very interesting. Sorry, Loree, what was your thoughts there?
Yeah. No, just to tag into what you're talking about, I just think it's important to recognize and remember when you were some parents and adults, teachers, whatever, when you were a teenager, you were very confused. You think you know everything, but you know very little, right? And so allowing young people that are,
Mhm.
you know, still children, to make such permanent
Yes.
decisions when you know they are not emotionally mature enough
Mhm.
to really understand the ramifications
Yeah.
and the long-term effects of what they're doing is so irresponsible. It's so unbelievably
Yeah.
irresponsible that I mean, I just don't know how anyone can conceive that that's an okay thing to do. And actually, it's funny that you brought this up today, because this morning when I woke up, I was reading an article on this exact topic, and it talks about several young women that were allowed,
Mhm.
and not only allowed but supported,
Yeah.
some by their parents, some not, but by the school, by the psychologist, the therapist, the doctor, to go ahead and move forward
Mhm.
with making these
Yeah.
drastic, sometimes irreversible changes. And now that they're a little bit older, so this happened when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, now that they're 20, 21, 22, they all
Yeah.
regret it.
Yeah.
And they all wish that they would have had a better support and a wider range of information
Yes.
than the narrow information that they got, that kind of railroaded
Yeah.
them, saying, yes, this is the best thing for you. They all regret it, and they all think it's a tragedy
Yeah.
that's going on. So I think that just when you're at one of the most insecure and confused stages
Mhm.
of your entire life is not the time
No.
to be deciding that you're going to start, you know, adding hormones,
Yeah.
blocking others, and hacking off body parts. That's insanity.
Yeah. Yeah. or in some cases, brutally adding body parts. I have a
Right.
friend of mine that was female that is, I believe, going through the transition to become male, and she described, or he, I don't know how to describe it, they described it to me, and it's brutal. It is absolutely brutal, and I think, again, as we've said many times before, whenever I talk to anyone, when we mentor folks, medication is always, to me, the last answer to the problem, unless it's obvious as to what's going on there. But it's more important to get to the root of what's going on here. And to give a little insight here, folks, and I know we're going off in a different area. That's okay. Some gold nuggets for you. What you tend to find is when you're 13 years old, probably to maybe anywhere from the age of about 7 to 9, probably to the age of about 14, 15, your brain is flip-flopping. So sometimes you can feel more male in terms of your masculinity and your hormones. Other times you can feel more female in terms of your hormones. And that's your brain doing this all the time. It's developing. That's what happens. But as you rightly said, Loree, the fact that scientists, I'm not surprised in the slightest that science, maybe I am in this day and age, but that scientists would take advantage of that, and it would be backed by the government, all in the name of, well, you got to be who you are. And the danger is you're being told, be who you are, by people who have no idea who they are. They're just backing what they believe that they are told, and it's come from somewhere.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know where.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think, a lot of this boils down to, we all have one of our most powerful human needs is connection. And when we are at a time of extreme disconnection with what's been going on for the last couple of years. Not only that, but even outside of that, though, when you're a teenager in school, the need to be part of a group is powerful. It's so overwhelmingly powerful because we don't want to be an outsider. To be an outsider, to not be part of the group, is it goes to our kind of ancient lizard brain of survival. If you are outside of the group, if you are outside of the tribe, if you are outside, then and you're disconnected, that meant probably certain death. You needed to be part of the group, part of your tribe, in order to help ensure your survival. So that's still a very powerful human need. And we, there's an aspect of ourselves that still interprets, if I'm not part of this group, if I'm not accepted, part of you, in a weird way thinks I'm not going to survive. That's devastating. That's the worst thing ever. So I think, what's happening, and kids are mean. They're still learning, what it is to be a good human being. They're mean. And so when you are not part of what you perceive to be the in-group or any group, you will start resorting, like what's happening to, well, maybe if I'm not this person and I'm that person instead, I will belong. I'll have belonging. I'll be important. I'll be connected. And to another extreme, I was hearing about some of these kids that are deciding that they're going to be cats. They're not going to be the other gender. They're going to be an animal instead. And now they want schools to put litter boxes in the schools for them. And they're dressing up with fuzzy tails and ears and walking around on all fours. So I think, before, when you were when you felt like you were on the fringe of your peer group, you were just miserable. You just dealt with it, or you found your other few people that were like that and you got through it. But now what they're doing is going to extremes. Well, I'll form my own group and I'll be this. I can be anything I want. I can be a boy if I was born a girl, or vice versa, or I can be a little of each, or I can be a fucking cat. Excuse my French. So I think that is a very alarming place to be. So I think that, understanding that this goes to a very deep driving human need of, I need to be connected to something. I need to be part of something. I need to feel like I'm important. And the more you have of that at home, the less likely you will be seeking it in such drastic ways outside of your home, in school or in some of these other more
Mhm.
extreme types of behaviors, it's just so you can be part of a group.
Absolutely. See, the thing is, I mean, that they see at the moment, it's happening a lot, and it's happening, sorry, girls, but it's happening more in girls than it is in guys,
Yep.
and younger as well. We're talking ages from 3 to 13. That is the number that people are actually getting sexual changes to their bodies. I mean, a 3-year-old. I mean, seriously. Anyway, but what they tend to find is, as you rightly said, Loree, and it's by the time that they reach 16 to 22, 23, 24, it's normally between 60% to 80% of people that either want to have it undone, reversed, if it is reversible, or
Yeah.
that regret that they've done it. But what you just described there, I mean,
Regret.
it's the kind of thing, when you were a small toddler, in elementary school, primary school, kindergarten, you're like, oh, I want to be a cat, I want to be a cat. That's the kind of thing that you think, but not for a, 15, 16-year-old person.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine someone coming to work with us and saying, well, what do you want to be, Mr. or Mrs.? Is there an option to be a cat? It's like, next, please. It's like, how? But
Yeah.
it shows really a very, very clear perception and perspective as to the powers that be and their mindset and what's going on. And this is something like you would find in a cartoon or a film or something. This doesn't feel like, in quotes, the real world.
Mhm.
And yet it's happening. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, you know how, as you've pointed out many times in this discussion, history repeats itself, and it just, so a few
But no
things
point in the
may look.
Bible, Loree, was, the gospel according to pussykins.
I missed that section.
The Apocrypha of Fido, it's just,
Yeah, yeah. Well, the pendulum is swinging way over here,
yes,
and it will come back,
absolutely.
and it'll swing over there. That's just kind of the rhythm of, I guess, the evolution of
Yeah.
humanity, is we're all struggling to become, more conscious beings and more aware and better humans.
Yeah.
But there's always the confusion and the messiness in the middle
Oh,
as
yeah.
we find our way there. So I pray, I really do. I hope and pray for some of these people that are doing such extreme things that my heart breaks for them when they discover at some point that, that was maybe not the right thing for them.
Yeah.
And now they have to deal with the outcome and figuring out how to move forward. That's tough. So I would hope that parents would remember how confused they were at that age and stand strong, even if it means your kid doesn't like you anymore, but they may thank you down the road. Because that's one of the things, even one of these that I was reading about in the story said, I wish my parents would not have been so willing to go along with my wishes at that age. I wish they would have said no. But, and then if you're an adult and then you want to do something drastic, and you have had more life experience under your belt and you feel like you're making a sound decision as an adult. But we all know that doesn't happen when you're a child.
Absolutely.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and then the thing is, if it's almost like putting out a saucer of sweets in front of a child. If you put them there and tell them these sweets are amazing, they're wonderful, you love them, they're going to take the sweets. And it's almost the same as, same analogy. If you tell a child, well, if you're not happy being who you are and you change it, you're going to feel amazing, you're going to feel wonderful, you're going to feel complete. That part of you that's always been missing, will suddenly be there. And it is interesting. I haven't had many conversations with folks that have gone through the surgery. I have had a couple of conversations with people prior to surgery, and it's been interesting seeing their mindset more than anything else. But asking one of them in particular, did this operation, fulfill that need? And they said it did for a short time. And I said, well, was the pain worth it? And they said, no, because it didn't last. And I said, that's really interesting. I mean, I was very thankful that this person shared it with me. But it's a really interesting part. And like you say, I mean, I'm sure in 1700s and the 1800s, France during the revolution, when the guillotine was brought in as a form of entertainment, they were thinking, when does the pendulum swing back the other way? Because it's Similar thing. It's just obviously now instead of having people's heads and arms lopped off, they're having pussycats. And, you know, I dread to think who cleans out the litter box, honestly. That's, yeah.
Well, when I discovered that, when I was informed of that, because I didn't know, I found that out when I was traveling this past week, and I didn't have any words.
Yeah.
I just didn't even have any words for it. I don't know what is going through the minds of parents.
Yeah.
But I guess, you know, if you have a child that at the age of 14 wants to identify as literally as a cat, then that pretty much answers my question about where are the parents and where are their heads. You know, I think, understanding that you can't change what's going on internally by making external changes, and your body's an external thing. It's not you, it's an external thing that houses you. And so if you have things going on that are, you know, that you are not happy about, that are causing you pain and anguish and, you know, emotional distress, that doesn't get fixed by changing anything external. Just like, you know, changing your room around, changing the furniture in your house, changing your body doesn't fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to address that first, and then you can consider if there's some other things externally, but you got to go to the mind first.
Absolutely. I mean, it's essentially like sitting in a car. You know, our bodies are the outer shell of a car, and our spirit is what sits in the car. And no matter how much you dress it up, how big, how much you spend money on it, it's still got four wheels, usually. Even the Batmobile has four wheels. It's still got a steering wheel, you know, it's still got a windscreen. It's still got a radio player that's going to lose signal at some point. You know, so it's been a really interesting conversation, Loree. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up for the show? Where can people find you as well on social media?
Thank you. Well, I think I just, as far as wrapping up, we covered a lot of ground there and went around the world a bit, which was really interesting and fun. I enjoyed it. But I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we could all, you know, just if we had to pick one thing, let's just focus for a while on kindness. I think kindness to yourself, kindness to the people that you live with, to your significant others, kindness and understanding toward people that you may not agree with. I think we just really need a massive dose of everybody just taking a breath and pausing and being kind. So that's what I would say, just as a very simple and clean wrap up to that. And I can be found on my website, which is loreebischoff.com. And all the places you can find me are on there. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the usual suspects. My YouTube is Loree Bischoff. And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier, the podcast is called We're Talking Shift, and that's on all the usual platforms. So I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. And it is, I mean, it's a great show, folks. There's no doubt about that. You get so many different guests and different perspectives and different talking points pretty much every single week, which is phenomenal. And for me, folks, I think, you know, as Jude said, you know, Loree echoed there, you know, all about kindness. I think if people spent more time focusing on themselves and stopped focusing on and worrying about so many other people, what they're doing, how they're behaving, I think the world would actually be a lot better of a place. It really would.
Yeah.
Because I think so many times people get so caught up in, you know, oh, well, this is what she's doing, this is what he's doing. And it's like, how's it affecting you? How are you letting it affect you? And I think, like Loree said, you know, focus maybe on yourself and being kind to yourself, because that's what's going to come out to other people. And of course, I want to thank you folks for watching and sticking in there with us. If you've got questions and comments, do feel free to comment in the section below. If you have got talking points and things that you want us to cover, of course, you can get in touch with us either on YouTube, Facebook, thebattlesweallface.com. And of course, if you are going through some of these struggles yourself, this is really what we're building up. This is what we're talking about now, because we're aware that what's going on in the education system needs to be addressed. It needs to change, and it can't just be allowed to just go on unnoticed, because that's the danger. You know, when the wars happened, World War II, World War One, they could have been stopped so much earlier, but they weren't. And it's kind of the same situation. If you catch an incident or an illness early, the chances are you can stop it from spreading into something horrific. And that's really what we're wanting to be, you know, to help people become aware in these uncertain times. So of course, folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend, because it could be the very thing that they need to hear in their hour of struggle. Come and visit us at thebattle'sweallface.com. All our shop and brand new website is up and fully running. And from Loree and myself, until next time, take care, God bless. Have a phenomenal week, my friends, and we'll catch you same place, same time next week. Take care.